Hello, welcome back to the podcast. This is episode number 3. And what I thought we'd talk about today is kind of give you a little bit of an insight into what it is kind of that I do in the process that I go through when I'm working with people, because I think it's quite useful as to where to start. So when someone comes to me and asks me to sort of get from where they are to where they want to be, I always come back to the same sort of starting point. Because from my experience, it's the foundation that has to be in place for you to sort of build something that's great. And that is building a foundation on your word. You know, when we talk about that, there's plenty of sort of old-fashioned sayings like your word is your bond and you're only as good as your word. But it really is so important. I find that it's also the conversation that confronts people the most, because a lot of people try and avoid that conversation, or a lot of the time they're trying to wing things so much that when you get to the crux of it, you're sort of almost feeling like that they're exposed to in a certain extent. It's like you're kind of full of crap underneath it all because you're not doing the things that you said you would do to yourself. It doesn't even matter even if you're being your word to somebody else, that doesn't really matter if you're not doing it to yourself. Because every time you try and dream of something, you say, I'm going to do this, there's this little voice on your shoulder saying you're full of crap, really, you know. But the reason I start there is that all of the greatest people in history, whether that be politically or in sports or in business, always have this in place. What they say to themselves gets done. Their word with themselves is immaculate. So when that word with yourself is immaculate, you can say something that you want to happen and things can start to happen because you're not in the way. And so this is really the first principle that I try and instill in anybody that I work with, in particular when I'm trying to unlock like their competitive fire and their greatness. And so this first principle I try and instill into people is never ever go to war with yourself. If you get in your own way, you can't win. Your focus should be on destroying your competition. Now, that sounds a little confronting in some respects, but I say it like that to really sort of light a fire. Most people sort of have this internal battle that's happening within them. And most of the time, it's your internal thoughts that stop you from doing the things that you want to do. So by me focusing that energy on something else and on your competition, it can help get you out of the way. Because really, competition is this dirty word, but it's actually sort of your pathway to freeing yourself and being about something outside of yourself so that you actually can do the things that you want to do. Competition can set you free. But really, the process we go through to actually make this real is this. You have to first understand the reason you go to war with yourself and that you've actually kind of been taught to do it. So let me dive into that a little bit deeper. So the first point we want to make is, what's that your word with yourself like? And I kind of call that self-integrity. So if you say something to yourself, does it get done? And really the first process we go through is to write down a list and progressively just go through and tick those things off. And it could be simple. It could be like, I'm going to get up and exercise, or I'm going to exercise 5 times a week and really only doing 2. It might be like, hey, I'm going to really eat whole foods, or I'm going to stick to a nutrition plan that you might have been given, and you're doing it maybe 3 days a week, and the rest you're kind of falling off the wagon. We tend to have big nights on the weekend, and you just, it's the kebabs at the end of the night. So that's our first place to start. The interesting thing is, you're not really taught to be your word with yourself. That self-integrity isn't the most important thing that you get told. Just think about when you're younger, you kind of get told to care about others and do things for others. Just kind of fair enough. That's actually how our society needs to work. But it doesn't actually lead to kind of greatness, as you'll kind of find out. So the second part we're going to talk about with this is, what's your word like to others? And that's kind of what we call your external integrity. Now that external integrity is like, if you say something to a mate, like, I'm going to turn up in this time, or I'm going to get that report finished, I'm going to do this at this time. Do you follow through on your word? Now, Most people are actually pretty lousy at the self-integrity. This one, people are a little bit better at, because from a young age, you kind of get told to do something for someone else. You get told to share. These sort of building blocks help build our society, which we need. We need everyone to kind of get along, but it doesn't set you up for greatness in terms of a pursuit. So your word to others, or this external integrity. So if you start to look at this external integrity with the greats, this is where you start to find some chinks in their armor. And you don't have to look too far to actually find out that a lot of the greats have had pretty lousy relationships. They might have had, fallouts with partners. They may have had affairs. They may have sort of got kids that don't talk to them. Even though we consider them the great people, their relationships are quite crap. Now, it's because their word to others really only matters when those other people can kind of help them on their journey. And that sounds a bit harsh. But the next layer of how society has kind of taught you to be your word is this thing that we call situational integrity. Now, if you think about this, there's holes in what people's word is all the time. Like if you ever known somebody who says, oh, you shouldn't steal, but they will go into the grocery store and they go, oh, there's a grape. Like, I just want to try one. Or they just try, it's like something out of the fruit section. And you say, well, hang on, you said you shouldn't steal, but didn't you just steal? And they say, yeah, but it's just a grape. So there's this situational integrity going on. Like, oh yeah, I have this integrity in one situation, but not in another. And then we might look at another situation like, hey, let's say you see there's $100 note on the ground, right? And you might just pick it up and say, that's fair game. There's no one else to give it to. You don't ask anybody. You just go, oh, that's fair game. Put it in my pocket. But you also are on the beach and you lose your wedding ring. You say, oh man, why didn't someone hand that in? That's because that situation is different, right? That $100 doesn't really matter. I'll put it in my pocket. That wedding ring is so important to me. So I would like someone to do the right thing in that situation. But when you start looking at that situational integrity, you start to see that society would like you to do the right thing in every situation. That's what we get ingrained into us. It's do the right thing. My daughter literally goes to a school that one of their mottos is do the right thing. It's instilled and it's ingrained. It's about do the right thing all of the time by the others. It's to never steal that grape. It's to never take that $100 off the ground. It's always to do the right thing by the other people. Now, if we sort of set up like a hierarchy for the greats, the people that really do the amazing things in this world, they have a different hierarchy. If we almost did it like a food pyramid, we're down that bottom base layer in society would be situational integrity. We want you to do the right thing by everybody in every situation as much as humanly possible. So that next layer up would be external integrity. So that would be when you say something to somebody else, you get it done. That's the second biggest priority in terms of our society. And then there would come the top layer to that. The top layer would be this self-integrity. You are the least important in terms of our society functioning. Your word to yourself kind of matters, but you know what? If you don't do the right thing by yourself, like you don't do what you said you were going to do, that has the least impact on us. It only really impacts you. But really, when we look at winners and the greats and people that do amazing things, that pyramid, if you like, is almost flipped. At the top is self-integrity. And that is the most important thing if you're going to do anything great, because that allows you to be solid with yourself, so you can actually dream things and know that you can make something happen. If there was a trick to manifestation, that would be it. If you know yourself to yourself as someone who does what they say they're going to do, of course you can say, hey man, I'm going to make $1 million this year. Of course you would. You're not in the way of that. You're like, well, I have belief, I have some skin in the game that I do what I say I'm going to do. The next layer down would be external integrity. So your integrity to others, your word to others matters, but it really only matters to the people that can help you on your journey. So with the greats, if they've got a trainer or they've got some staff that are helping them with their journey. They are their word to them. But sometimes relationships fall down because it's like, well, yes, I love you, but it's not really helping me with where I want to go. It's where things fall down. But it's also the biggest opportunity when I work with very successful people. It's how we clean up their relationships as we start cleaning up their word with others, because their word with themselves is great. It's the relationships where they say, hey, I'll come and pick you up at this time. I'll come and do this. And it's like, hey, our work's just busy. Sorry, I can't come. And you just start slowly not being your word, and just relationships break down. And then the last and the least important is situational integrity. And this is a tricky conversation because it doesn't mean that the successful people do the wrong thing. It's sort of quite the opposite. It's just that if you're trying to do the right thing all the time, the greats kind of see that as a waste of time. Like, why would I focus on that? I just need to focus on me and being my word to myself. And then I just need to be the word to the people around me that matter. That's it. This external world, like do the right thing all the time, that has us all freeze, like not be self-expressed, to kind of like, oh, don't express yourself too much. I'm from New Zealand. Tall poppy syndrome is rife there. If you stick out your head too much there, it's cut off, I remember, people would come up to you on the street, and if you looked at them too long, if you look at people too long, it's like, what are you looking at? And you almost have a fight. Or the other classic was like, are you getting smart? That's the classic. Someone wants to start a fight where I'm from. It's like, are you getting smart? Because that's the worst thing possible. It's like, who do you think you are, expressing yourself or being a little bit too loud or cocky or whatever that is? So when you can start to see how society is kind of engineered in terms of you prioritizing what you say and what you do, it's not with yourself. It's not with your self-integrity. It's what's most important for the greater good. Now, that allows our society to function somewhat. I'm not an expert on society. I don't know if society would collapse if everybody worried about just their own word to themselves and to the people that are in their immediate vicinity, right? But what I can say is, when you're trying to produce results, when you're trying to do amazing things, if you don't have that foundation of your word with yourself, you're really not going anywhere fast. It's kind of like trying to build on sand, that classic analogy of trying to build on sand. It's sooner or later that's going to come undone. The better analogy would be, let's say, for instance, I always use the example of the Sydney Harbour Bridge. If you look at the foundations of the Sydney Harbour Bridge, they are so vast, they are so wide and so deep. You could build anything on that foundation, You can build the Sydney Harbour Bridge on that foundation. You could build a house on that foundation, or you could build the Sydney Harbour Bridge. That's important because the foundation dictates anything that can be built on it. You definitely can't build the Sydney Harbour Bridge on house foundations. They're not going to be strong enough. So if you look at that analogy of your word as kind of this imaginary foundation that anything can be built off it, if it's sound, like if it's wide and deep, your word is so solid in every aspect of your life, man, you can build great things. You can build amazing things. Now, this is the most confronting conversation. I'm going to start it early on in the podcast because, if it doesn't interest you and you get angry by that, I kind of want you to get a bit activated. But I want you to say that you can't argue with it. You really can't. If you do want to argue with me, you can just show me your results, because all I'll need to do is look at your results and then I'll watch where it comes apart. And in particular, where this becomes really helpful, where you're sort of going into mental warfare with people, So in sport, this becomes really relevant. You can start to smell on your competitors, whether they're their word with themselves. And you look at the best trash talkers of all time, or the best people that look for chinks in their opponent's armor. That's what they're looking for. They're looking for, am I my word over you? The best example, I tell this story all the time, so I'll tell it again, but it's the story of Kobe Bryant and Jay Williams. Now, Jay Williams wanted to get up some extra shots when he was playing the Lakers. So you can sort of book some time to go in and shoot around. As he goes in for his session to have a shoot around, He looks down the other end and there's Kobe Bryant already in a sweat. He's shooting up game shots. He's got really intense. He's like, oh man, he's going pretty hard. He goes and starts warming up, starts shooting his shots. He goes through his whole routine. I think he had like a routine of making 500 shots. I kind of might be making that up. At the end of his session, he goes and kind of looks down the other end. Kobe Bryant's still going for it. So he kind of packs up his stuff and leaves. That night, they play the Lakers. They get torched. I think Kobe Bryant dropped something like 40 points, right? So Jay Williams goes, I got to go and ask this guy, what the hell is he doing? He goes up to Kobe Bryant and he says, hey man, like, do you always train like that before a game? He said, no. I just heard you were coming into the stadium. I just want to let you know, no matter how hard you work, no matter what you do, you're never going to outwork me. Never. Now, that psychological battle is everything. Kobe Bryant gave away that secret for greatness. He gave away that secret to that Jay Williams. It's like, hey man, welcome to the game. My word with myself is going to beat yours every time. So anytime they were going to be up against each other in competition, Kobe Bryant's already living in his head rent free because Kobe Bryant knows he's his word. He knows he has done the work more than this other guy. Just by knowing that alone, he can look at you and just see straight through you. When you say, hey man, I'm going to knock down the last shot and beat you. Just like, oh really? Like, who are you going to put your money on? If it came down to Jay Williams and Kobe Bryant for the shot at the end of the game and you could put a bet on, I know where I'd put my money. It would have been on Kobe Bryant 100 times. It's the same thing with Michael Jordan. Michael Jordan could see himself in Kobe Bryant. That's why he took him in underneath his wing. He could see he was obsessed by the same things that he was. He could find an ally in that pursuit of your word, doing things that you're willing to do that other people aren't. It's your word with yourself. If you can do that, it unleashes everything. Now, obviously, I have to go through this myself. It's sort of an ongoing battle that you have to continually win. You don't sort of just arrive at your word and then that's it. It just keeps happening. But if you look at things, and this is the way I look at the world now, and it's what I invite people that I'm working with to look at. If life isn't working out, if I'm like, man, I am just up against it at the moment, nothing's working out, like deals are falling through, this isn't happening, people around me aren't getting results, my relationship with my kids just isn't great, with my wife just isn't going well, I'm just not feeling good. The first place I look isn't outside of me. I just check in and say, man, where's my word at? Because a lot of the time you're just like, man, my word's out. My word with myself is out. What do I need to clean up? And a lot of the time the list gets pretty long, especially if you're asleep at the wheel. The list can get long. But if you can keep that list short, I tell you, you will sleep like a baby. You will be able to achieve things that others cannot do. If you can build that foundation over a long enough period of time, man, you can become unstoppable. When you say you are going to do something, I kind of come back to that betting world, not because I'm a betting man. It's just if you're your word to yourself, you know yourself. You can bet on yourself. Someone says to you, you ain't going to get that done. You can go, hey man, how much are you willing to put on that? For me, that's the best thing that anyone could ever say to me. You can't do it. It's not because I just want to go off that anger towards them. It's just like, cool, it's time for me to step up. My word to myself matters. They said you can't do it. I know I can clean that up with myself. I'm in control of what actions I take. So hell yeah, I can get it done. Bet against me. Go for it. It's the best way to motivate me. Tell me I can't do something. It's because I know my word with myself is my ticket. It's not what they think. So I hope you took some things out of that. Your word with yourself is the most important thing. Then the second point is your word to others, making sure you're your word with the people that matter the most to you. That if you can get those two things in alignment, you will have an amazing life, especially an inner circle, because everything's kind of complete and intact. And that situational integrity, kind of doing the right thing, by all means, Do that where it matters, but it's not really your priority. Your priority are those top two things, because really, if you're doing that, you can always hire a PR team to take care of those other right, wrong, good and bad issues. What you're after is your pursuits to make sure yourself and your family and your loved ones and your friends and the colleagues and the people that matter to your goals, it matters that sound. And the other thing is you could use this for good or bad. You know what I mean? Like everything that you're going to learn in marketing, the whole lot, you could use it for bad or you could use it for good. But if your purpose in life, which is another thing that I work on with people, if your purpose is to make a real difference and you say you want to do something and that's intact, you're up to great things anyway. You're going to make a huge difference to the world while you're here. So we'll talk about that on another episode, how to line up this word to yourself with your purpose. But to me, your word comes first. Then we can start talking about the purpose. Otherwise, you're going to say what your purpose is and you're going to have this voice saying you're full of crap. I hope you got something out of today. Please, if you have any questions or comments, put them in the comments below or reach out to me online. I'll be more than happy to get into a conversation with you. But for now, it's bye from me.